Sayadaw said that one day each week he has taken one day to rest. But today he's not taking a rest because last week he had to attend to a certain matter, and because of that, one day was lost as far as the Dhamma talks are concerned. So today, this Uposatha day, Sayadaw will make up for the missed Dhamma talk. And the topic for today will be a continuation of what Sayadaw has been explaining. That no matter how deep and profound and difficult to see the Dhamma is, when one blows out or dispels the kilesas, the nivaranas, the obstacles to concentration with suitable practice, it becomes obvious, it becomes easy to see. And Sayadaw has been speaking about this in brief. So, because every arising object that we observe is paramatta, is ultimate reality, why do we use names and label them? Why can't we just look? This question has arisen, and sometimes people ask, well, why do we use names? Why do we label what we observe? And Sayadaw would like to explain about this in terms of the theory and the practice. And what he's going to say about this is not his idea. Our great benefactor, Mahasi Sayadaw, explained what is in the texts in terms of the practice, and Sayadaw will explain using his teacher's way. Sayadaw spoke about what is jhana, and he explained that it is focused, close observation, contemplation, concentration on the object, and that samatha jhana uses 38 or 40 different types of objects. And when one wants to meditate on the earth kasina, Sayadaw explained that one makes a kasina and puts it in front of themselves, and then they observe that, they look at that, and they recite, and they say the name to themselves. In Pali, Patavi, Patavi, or earth, earth. So this is the method for developing samatha jhana. And when the object is not clear, one even softly recites the word Patavi, Patavi aloud. But later one does it silently. And doing this makes the object clear. Vipassana yogis observe nama and rupa and how they're related as cause and effect. And we use names. We label what we are observing. And the main thing, of course, we're observing is rising and falling of the abdomen. Well, rising is a name for what happens to the abdomen. What happens is expansion or stiffness or tension. These are the manifestation of the earth element. But the name we use for it is rising. And falling is a name for the relaxation and movement that happens when the air goes out. And this is also the air element, Vayodhatu. And sitting, of course, is a name we apply to when we observe the whole body, feeling this support or stiffness, uprightness. The touching, when we note a touch point, we use the word touching to label the area where there's the sensation of touch. Bending and stretching of the arms, we use those labels. It's the body that is bending and stretching, but we use the label lifting, moving, placing, leaning, and so on. So we use words. When we observe something, we use words that are commonly understood. And we apply these labels with the mind. We don't need to say them aloud. So with Vipassana jhana, the observing every newly arising object, we're observing sabhava, true nature, and cause and effect. So isn't it enough just to observe closely? Since jhana is this focused, close observation, with Vipassana jhana, can't we just observe closely? Why do we need to use labels? And there are many questions that can be asked about this. So some people ask verbally, and some people ask with their mind. But there are some people who come here to practice who are accustomed to just looking at the objects without labeling. And when they are asked to label, it kind of sets them off balance. So today Sayadaw will explain how this is presented in the texts in a brief way. So this problem, if one thinks about one's experience when one started school, this problem can be understood quite easily. So when we start kindergarten or elementary school, in some places before we even learn any letters, we just sing songs and have a snack. And when the child is happy going to school, then the teacher starts to teach words. And first using poems to learn words, nursery rhymes and so on. And one has to learn the alphabet. So one does this by reciting the letters out loud, A, B, C, and so on. One has to be able to say the sound of the letter correctly. And then when one can do that, then they teach the children 3-letter words, such as C-A-T, cat, and R-A-T, rat. And from there, one goes to small sentences. And this is just like feeding a child bit by bit to make the child strong. So the same way the teacher teaches bit by bit how to spell. So when learning words, one has to start by saying them aloud, because one can't just recite them in one's mind before one can say them aloud. One has to first learn how to pronounce them. And one has to learn the letters this way too, by reciting them aloud. And one even needs to read words aloud in sentences, small sentences first, and then long sentences, paragraphs, and stories. All these things start out by being read aloud. But when one becomes skilled, then one no longer needs to read aloud. One can just read in one's mind, just look at the words and one knows. So if Satipatthana yogis think about this comparison with their childhood school days, they will know that applying labels to every arising object is needed. We need to do this. And if we compare the situation as a yogi with our beginning school days, we can see we can see how they are similar, these situations. And the teacher also has a responsibility to explain this. And this is what Sayadaw will do today. In the area of practical Dhamma, the Buddha used 2 words which are paramattha and paññatti. Paramattha, these two in English common translation is Paramattha for Paramattha, ultimate reality, and Paṇḍitā is concept or name. So Paramattha are those things which one can experience directly with one's eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. They're things that can be directly seen, that can be directly tasted, touched, smelled, and so on. And these things can both be something that is within arm's reach, as well as something that is far away. These can be things that are quite small and refined, detailed. They can also be coarse. So on a gross level, if we just feel a bony area in our body, we feel hardness. And if we feel the fleshy area, or the skin or the muscle, we can feel softness and gentleness. And these things are also maybe solid. There can also be moisture in the body. And there's also the sense of heaviness. And one can also feel there's heat, warmth, cold, lightness. And sometimes what one feels is stiffness, tension, movement, vibration. So these are all types of physical things that can be directly experienced, paramattha. And as far as what is mental, this is basically knowing. Knowing a sight, knowing a sound, knowing a smell, a taste, a touch, knowing a thought. Contact of something with the mind. And then feeling good, bad, or neutral. And all these things have names. According to whatever language we speak, we use names for these things. So for example, in Pali, things which are hard, soft, and so on, hard and soft, are both called patavi, or earth. And something may be not just hard, but hard and solid. Or it can be hard and be connected. It can also be moist or flowing. Something can be, it can be cold, hot, light. It can be stiff, tension. There can be stiffness, tension, and movement. So if we want to experience stiffness practically, stiffness or tension, we can just put air into a balloon and feel how the surface of the balloon feels. So we all have names for these things, and having names makes it easy for us to distinguish one thing from the next. And we use names that are appropriate for the object. And these names are called Paṇḍitā in Pali. Paṇḍitā. And the Buddha used the word Tajja Paṇḍitā, which means a name that is appropriate to the sabhava, to the true nature. So these are all, we use these names that are appropriate for the thing. We use these in the world, and these are necessary. For example, when a child is born, we give the child a name. We don't just call it body or kid. We give the person a name so that we can distinguish the child from another person. And we give things names appropriate to the thing, and we give it a name so that we can use that name. So these names are called in Pali Tajja Paṇḍitā, the name that is appropriate to the thing itself. In the food and drink that we eat and drink every day, there's a variety of flavors: sweet or sour, hot, bland, salty, bitter. If we bite into a sweet bit of food, then we experience the sweet flavor. And we each use a different word depending on our language. We each use a different word for this sweetness. And this is called tajapanyati, the name appropriate for the thing. If we bite into a bit that is sour, then we experience the sour taste, and we know this is sour. So that is the name that we use for it, tajapanyati. And if we happen to bite into a chili or something like that, then it's hot. And we know this hot taste, and hot is the name that we use for it. Biting into something bland, we know the bland taste, and bland is the word used for it. So salty things, something that is salty on the tongue, when we experience that, we know this salty taste, and saltiness, salty is the name we use. Bitter things on the tongue, we know the bitter taste. And so with each of these, according to the taste, we use a name. And this name that we use is tajapanyati. And for mental phenomena also, there's thinking. And when thinking arises, we know the thinking, and we apply the label thinking or something similar. And this label that we use, the name that we use for it, is tajapanyati. We can't just call things sabhava. We have to use names so that we can distinguish one thing from another. So for example, when we are sitting down and we want to go to the standing up position, we have to move the hands, and there's the movement, there's the stretching of the arms, and in each of these things there's sabhava, and the names for these things follow along with the true nature. There's the feeling of support when we lean our weight on the hands, feeling support, where there's heaviness. Those are the names for the things we experience. And as we go bit by bit, according to the object, we use the names appropriate for that object. And when we are in the standing position, then we know the standing. And so, and the same thing when we go from standing to sitting down again. We want to sit down, and then there's the sitting down, and in each moment by moment, there is nama and rupa occurring. And for each of these occurrences that we encounter while we watch the sitting down process, there's a name, and these names are called tajapanyati. These sabhava, or true nature, arise due to causes which come together. And if we examine these things, we can really know them. They are something that is really there, and therefore they're called bhava in Pali. Bhava means what is happening, what is there, something that is really there. It's also called rupa, or essence, substance. So why is it called bhava? Because bhavati upajjati bhavo. Bhavati means it is. Upajjati means it arises. It occurs. So because it is something that really is there, undeniably is there, it is called bhava. And these are things such as hardness, softness, coarseness, heat, warmth, coldness, lightness, flowing solidity, moisture, stickiness, stiffness, tension, vibration, and so on. All these things are undeniable. They really are there. So they have some type of substance, some essence, and this substance or essence is called bhava. So these qualities which arise each have their own particular flavor or quality. So the earth has a quality of being hard, soft, coarse, gentle. Water has the qualities of being flowing, sticky, moist, cohesive, solid. And then the temperature element has the characteristics, qualities of being hot or cold, warm, light. And the air element also has qualities, stiffness, tension, movement, relaxation. And then, of course, there's also the knowing of these. So all these things that can be experienced, they each have their own quality, their own individual essence, which is called, in Pali, this is explained as sako bhavo. Sako means one's own, its own individual, and bhavo is substance, which is really there. So this is condensed into the word sabhava. So sabhava is sometimes translated as individual characteristic or as individual essence or substance. So one has to understand this. These individual characteristics or true nature arise and then pass away. They don't stay the way they are. They don't stay the way when they arise, they don't stay that way. They disappear. Just now, it arises and then it's gone. The old is always being replaced by the new. And this quality pervades every single type of true nature that we can experience, that they arise and then pass away. So it is called this, having the quality of arising and then passing away is called samanya lakkhana, or common characteristic, universal characteristic. So everything that has its own individual true nature, except for nibbana, arises and then passes away. And this character of arising or passing away is a common characteristic to all nama and rupa. So who can deny that these individual characteristics and common characteristics exist? One can't deny them. Where do these natural characteristics and common characteristics occur? They occur in sankhara. Sankhara means, it's called sometimes conditioned phenomena. So sankhara means something that is made by causes coming together. And examples of sankhara are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, rising, falling, lifting, moving, placing. So in each of these, there's one group after another of nama and rupa. And these are called sankhara, or compound phenomena, conditioned phenomena. In the moment of hearing, the ear receives the sound. So hearing is a phenomena that occurs due to causes. There's the ear receiving the sound, and this is like a door which the sound can come in. The ear exists because of past karma, past actions. But in the present, we have the ear, a good ear capable of hearing, due to other causes too. For example, the ears have to be kept so that they're not too hot. We can't let them get burned. We can't have them be too cold. And we need to eat food so that the body is healthy, including the ear. And we may need medicines also for the ear. And it also may need weather. May need things like water or to be cleaned and so on. And so all these causes contribute to us having an ear which is capable of hearing in the present moment. And our eyes also are similar. The fact that we have eyes capable of seeing is due to past karma. But in the present, we still are able to see because of supporting factors such as the environment, the external conditions of heat and cold, air, moisture, and so on, the conditions of food, the food that we ingest, the nutrition that's contained in the food, and also our mind is important in the health of our eyes. So eyes which are capable of seeing are also something that arises due to causes, and it's called rupa sankara. That is a compound, physical compound. And the visible object too is something that in some cases occurs due to past karma. It can also occur due to the mind. It can also be conditioned by weather. For example, things that we see outside of us, like the trees. These are considered, this is an object that it's called caused by udu, which a word for this is weather or environment or season. And also their visible object may be something that is caused by ahara or nutrition. Sound can be caused by the environment, udu. For example, when the wind blows, when there's a storm, and then tree branches strike against each other, and this creates sound. So this sound is said to be uduja. It's created by weather or environment. And then, of course, the sound of animals yelling or crying, those are mentally produced, chittaja. And the sound, there can also be sound, other types of sound too, like when clothing rubs or something like that. That's also can be considered to be both of those, chittaja and uduja. So all these things occur due to causes. They're not created by some individual. And because they arise due to causes coming together, they are called sankhara. Also, there's hearing consciousness, knowing the sound. And the present causes for hearing consciousness to arise are, first of all, there's an ear capable of hearing, and then sound strikes the ear. And when the sound strikes the ear, there's phassa, or contact of the sound with the mind. And if the sound is something that is pleasant, then there will be a pleasant feeling. And if the sound is something dislikable, unpleasant to us, then there will be an unpleasant feeling. So all these things are called sankhara, and this means that they arise like chains, links in a chain, due to causes. And these are also, all these things that we call sankhara are nama and rupa. This compound conditions have nothing to do with paññatti, or concept or names. In one's life, in one's being, in one's nama and rupa, there are 6 sense doors. These are called sense bases. They're like the receptors for experience. And there are 6 types of objects, various objects. These are called strikers. These too are elements. So when a striker strikes the base, its relevant base, then there's a spark. The spark, just like when one strikes a match on the side of a matchbox. This spark is the knowing mind. And it's very evident that one by one, moment by moment, these things are happening as cause and effect. So the sound strikes the ear, and there's hearing. And we label it as hearing. Hearing is something that occurs as a group. It's not just one thing. The whole group is called hearing. And in this group, if one wants to know, well, what is it that makes up this thing called hearing? One has to just watch it, just observe it as hearing. The same is true for seeing. Seeing is also a group of mental and physical things coming together. We label it as seeing. Smelling too. Notice it as smelling. Tasting as tasting. Touching as touching. Thinking as thinking. We observe these sense experiences as a whole. We can't just pick out one thing to observe. We have to observe it as a whole. When we do this, we come to see the parts that are there. So, for example, when we want to know somebody, when we first get to know a person, we look at the face. So we don't just look at part of the face. We look at the whole face. And so, first of all, the first thing to do is to look straight at the person's face, which is made up of eyes, ears, nose, and so on. The face has all these things. But we look straight at the face and we focus on it. And if our eyes happen to fall on the forehead, we know the forehead. If our eyes happen to fall on the nose, we know the nose. If our vision happens to fall on the ears, we know the ears. If the vision happens to fall on the lips, we know the lips. So if we are observing this face clearly, we know where the mind is looking. So if one wants to know the parts of this face, one has to start by looking at the whole face. And from there, one knows the parts. The parts become apparent when one looks at the whole face. And it is the same if we observe any sense experience, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, rising, falling, lifting, moving, placing. So if we observe these things clearly, the mind will see some part of what is happening. And in seeing one part, one will also come to know the other parts that are involved in that phenomena. So one will know, we observe the phenomena, the experience as a whole. But what we come to know is one part specifically, and the other parts also become apparent. That's all for today. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.